Good morning, 8th graders. Today is April 29th, 2020. Uh, Discussion topics today is a new level of immigration or new type of immigration to the United States. Maybe not new type, but a new burst, I don't know, a new peak of immigration in the United States. And the idea of two different receptacles where immigrants would be required to go through to come into the country. So we'll talk about that, especially Ellis Island today, and take a look at what would have been required if you were an immigrant, or maybe what your great grandparents went through a long time ago if they were immigrants from somewhere, European immigrants coming into the United States, or even Asian immigrants coming into the United States in the late 1800s into the early 1900s, mid 1900s. So, your assignment, if you have not taken the quiz from yesterday, get on it. There's still quite a few of you that haven't done it yet. I know that some people have just decided that school's over. If you, I guess, decide that's the path you want to take, you will not get a grade for my class. Incomplete assignments will rack up on you really quickly. So don't let me down. Please take care of this as quickly as you can. Okay. So when we talk about new immigrants, the new arrivals that were coming into America, European immigrants were coming in on the East Coast to Ellis Island, and probably everybody's heard of Ellis Island. I'm going to show you some pretty cool pictures and talk about it a little bit. There is a link to an Ellis Island video on the History Channel here that's actually a pretty cool video. Maybe I'll link that in the stream, but we're not going to watch this one. There's another one coming up that we'll watch. And then Asian immigrants that entered between probably 1910 and 1940 or 1950, somewhere in that range, came in on Angel Island in Los Angeles on the West Coast. So Ellis Island, East Coast, Angel Island, West Coast. But this is what Ellis Island looks like. It's kind of located between New York City and New Jersey. I believe New York claims it, but it's probably closer to New Jersey. I'm not really sure on that one, but gorgeous, beautiful place. And unfortunately, when Ellis Island was abandoned, when they stopped using it, when ships would stop coming to Ellis Island to drop immigrants off, and it was used as sort of a gateway into the United States that you had to pass through, it really fell apart. It kind of fell into ruins, and it took some people and a lot of volunteers and a lot of money to kind of bring it back to its former glory. So this is a picture of the Great Hall. This is the same picture you see here. Is this here? Just a different angle. But many people were held here in the Great Hall. This is sort of where they'd end up, almost boxed in like cattle. So they'd get off of their ships and they'd be taken into Ellis Island, into the Great Hall. And here they were detained for all sorts of reasons, medical reasons, legal reasons. They might do some sort of background check, though there weren't any computers and fingerprinting wasn't a thing. So there weren't a whole lot of things they could do. But sometimes you'd be sent back to your home country if you had a contagious disease without your family, because there was an expense incurred in sending you home. So if you were sick or had something that was contagious, if you came into the United States in 1910 with COVID-19, they're turning you around, putting you on a boat and sending you back home. If you came with your children stay. They're not going to pay the fee to send the kids back home with you unless you had the money to send. But most immigrants coming into the United States typically didn't have a whole lot of money to spend on a return trip. So many children were orphaned from their families as a result of this. But Ellis Island kind of is functioning from 1892 until 1954. 12 million of our ancestors come through Ellis Island. Look at this. Between 1910 and 1914, 5,000 to 10,000 people a day came through Ellis Island. So many of us, depending on how old our ancestors or how long ago our ancestors came into this country, can trace our roots back to this time. But the holding usually took anywhere from a day to 3 days before you were actually allowed off of Ellis Island, and you'd take a ferry boat into either New York City or Newark, New Jersey. But during that 1 day to 3 days, all sorts of things had to happen. You had to get paperwork to prove who you were, which is also kind of an interesting thing because, excuse me, I've been working outside with the chainsaw. It's kind of an interesting thing because if you look in a phone book at the most common names in America, Smith, Johnson, a lot of times the immigrants that came and got those names didn't originally come with the name Smith. But if they were coming from Eastern Europe, for instance, they might have some names that were difficult to pronounce. So, in some instances, the English only speaking receptionists, the people that were working as Ellis Island, would change their name because they didn't understand it and they couldn't spell it and they didn't speak English. So, okay, thanks, Mr. Smith. So, they gave them their paperwork that way. They had undergo medical testing. As they're packaged into these cattle pens. They weren't really cattle pens, but that's a great way to describe them because they really were fenced off. And they would move the cattle pens through a little bit at a time. But the workers at Ellis Island would actually send sort of, I guess I'd call them sort of almost like spies, walking through these pens of humans, checking them out. And if they happen to notice something wrong with them, like maybe they had a cough or they were walking funny or something weird about them, they would mark it on them. If they saw someone off in a corner talking to themselves, they automatically made an assumption that they had something wrong with them. And then later, a physician or a doctor would do some sort of a physical examination to determine whether there was something. So whoever this spy is would walk through around these people, maybe just pat them on the back. You wouldn't think anything of that if someone walked up and patted you on the back. But they'd carry with them a piece of chalk. And if they noticed something strange about these people, they would mark them with an identifier so that when they got to the real doctor would know what to check them for. And there's a pretty simple reason for this. For instance, most of you have noticed that I walk with a limp, especially when it's cold out. If I try really hard, sometimes I can fake it like I don't have a limp. Or if you sprained your ankle, and this becomes an issue like with the Holocaust too. If there's something wrong with you, you're going to the gas chambers right away. Now we're not talking about Holocaust in this instance; it's just an example. But if you knew that that was what was going to happen, you're either going to become a slave worker or you're going to die. If you had a really badly sprained ankle, could you fake it at least for a while? So if you went up in front of the physician and there was something wrong with you, you act pretty normal while you're in front of the physician. The physician, though, would look and see these letters on you. So if someone walked up and put an X on your back, that meant that you were suspected to have some sort of a mental defect. Yeah, I wish we were in class right now. We would have some fun with all of these. An X with a circle around it meant that you had a definite signs of a mental disease. B, you've got a bad back. Well, we don't necessarily want people in this country that can't work and contribute. C, conjunctivitis. That's another word for pink eye. Pink eye is very spreadable and can be very deadly. I'm going to come back to the CT trachoma. That's another eye one. E, your eyes. Maybe you got googly eyes. F, there's something wrong with your face. Oh, I have so many mean things to say right now, but since I don't have an audience in front of me, I can't say any of them. It's so sad. But you all know who I would pick on right now, but don't say it out loud because that would be rude. FT, you've got bad feet. Goiter, usually a lack of iodine. We don't really get goiters very often. H, heart problem. How can you tell someone has a heart problem? Well, if there's a flight of stairs and they climb halfway up the flight of stairs and they have to stop and catch their breath, usually a sign of a weak heart. A hernia, I'm not sure what, lameness means they can't walk quite right. A bad neck. Gosh, I feel bad because I fit half of these categories. Yeah, be quiet, Nate. I don't have any mental defects. Physical lung issues, PG, pregnancy, scalp. I don't know what's wrong with anybody's scalp. Senility, like old people become senile. Sometimes they sort of lose their marbles. Anyway, I want to come back to this trachoma. Trachoma, sort of like pink eye or conjunctivitis, was an eye disease, except very, very contagious. Touching. If you touch someone that has trachoma, it spreads to your eyes very easily. And the only test, at least that I'm aware of, that was available at that time, apparently it was a big deal back then. I read an article, not an article, I read a thing a little bit ago about trachoma. It said some 2.2 million people per year suffer from trachoma in the world. 1,000 or fewer cases in the United States per year. it can lead to blindness if not treated. Back then, it almost always led to blindness. And blindness in the early 1900s sort of almost meant uselessness. Today, someone who's blind or vision impaired can be fully useful in society. There are plenty of ways to integrate them into society, and they're very capable of doing pretty much everything that a regular vision person can do. But to test for trachoma, they took a hook, sort of like a crochet needle, if you know what a crochet hook looks like. Martha, you'll have to show us in our Zoom what a crochet hook. I bet, Martha, you can help us with that, can't you? So Zoom on Thursday, bring a crochet hook. But you hold up the eyelid and you reach back behind the eyeball so you can see if there's scarring back here. I can't imagine how painful that must have been. I don't want anybody touching my eyeball, but trachoma, if you have trachoma, you're getting sent home. So you better have good vision and no eye diseases. Here's more tests. So there's a full hospital on Ellis Island. The thing was amazing. And they take men and women in separate rooms. So this wasn't really a humiliating experience. This was a test to see if you were going to be able to come into the United States and be able to contribute to our society as a working member of America. Here's some fun facts. 1875, no prostitutes or criminals. I don't know how they knew if you were either one. It'd be pretty easy to lie about. Chinese exclusion. Also, no lunatics or idiots. No idiots in America. Country full of idiots. Anyway, anarchists are denied entry. Anarchists is someone who wants to overthrow governments. Mental and physically handicapped people are denied. Children without adults. 1917, it becomes an army hospital, and a literacy test is introduced. So you had to be able to read and write. In 1921, there was a quota. Not more than 3% of the total of a country already living in the United States. By 1952, nearly all Asians were banned from entry. So lots of different bannings, I guess. This is kind of a cool video. It just shows some facts and statistics about Ellis Island. So I'm going to play it. You're going to watch it. I think I'm going to play it. I had a pretty cool video. 40% of us trace our roots back to Ellis Island. Angel Island opened as a military base. You can see a little bit of a difference there in Los Angeles. It opened for immigration 1910 to 1940. I'm not sure what dates I gave you earlier, but going through the same medical examination. So much smaller scale and mostly Asian immigrants coming into Angel Island because it's on the Pacific side of the United States. And sort of military style barracks, but it opened up as a military base. So, duh, it's going to be military style barracks. Once they got here, they had to find work. Most of the time, immigrants ended up going to places where other people from the same place were. So, if I moved away, if I moved to California in the fall, I might feel a lot more comfortable if I can find other people from Nebraska to hang out with on a Saturday afternoon when the Huskers are playing because we've got something in common. Definitely a language. I want to go somewhere where the people speak the same language. So Chinese stayed in the West. Europeans settled either in New York or Boston or Philadelphia or New Jersey, or many of them headed to the Midwest. Our Irish and German roots. They wanted to be farmers. Japanese sugarcane plantations in Hawaii. A ghetto. This is sort of a little bit different, but it's a rundown place where people from same ethnic backgrounds ended up. And if you're from one ethnic background, you didn't typically go into the other ethnic background's ghetto. You stayed out. It's sort of almost gangster-like. Mexican immigrants went to the American Southwest in California. So some of those things are still true today. If you're a Chinese immigrant heading to a large city on the West Coast, you end up in Chinatown because it's the most comfortable. The food is familiar, the language is familiar, and then from there you might spread out a little further. Some pictures of people getting off of the boats, the excitement that they must have felt, the anxiousness, the fear, the unknown, all of those things just picking up and moving. So tomorrow in our discussion, we'll move on to reaction to the immigrants, whether that's racism or prejudice or hatred or acceptance, and also how do the immigrants themselves react to those reactions. So please watch the video today, tomorrow. If you haven't taken the quiz yet from yesterday, which would be Tuesday, go back and do it. You're behind. If you're missing the test from a long, long time ago, go back and do it. You're behind. I don't want to give anybody a no grade, so please take care of your business. You guys have a good day. See ya.